Someone in a tailored suit just leaned forward across their immaculate desk, adjusted their expensive glasses, and asked the question they thought would corner you. Who trained you? And in that instant, the air shifted. They expected a name, a program, a certificate, some neat lineage they could verify, categorize, and file away in their well-organized database. They were waiting for you to drop a mentor's name, to recite your institutional pedigree, to hand them the receipt for your evolution as if you'd purchased it from some strip mall seminar. But instead you smiled, the kind of smile that makes their pen pause mid-signature, and said the only truth that ever mattered: nobody did. That's when their confusion started to curdle into something else. Something that looked a lot like fear, barely disguised behind a business casual mask. Because in that moment, they realized they were sitting across from something they couldn't track, couldn't predict, couldn't control through their usual systems. People like you don't fit their frameworks. You're self-forged, the kind who weaponized isolation, who turned abandonment into a research lab. They've got policies for graduates, pipelines for certified professionals, protocols for those molded by approved systems. But you learned in the basement of your own breakdown, studied at the University of No One Cares, and earned your degree in the school of figure it out or die trying. There's no accreditation board for that kind of curriculum. No alumni network for those who taught themselves mastery while everyone else was collecting participation trophies. You didn't have a coach, you had consequence. You didn't have a trainer. You had survival instincts sharpened by a learning curve that would snap most minds like dry twigs. And now, here you are, sitting in their boardroom, their office, their interview space, armed with skills they can't source and knowledge they can't verify. It drives them insane, because their entire world runs on traceability, on knowing origins so they can predict outcomes. But you're the glitch in their algorithm, the variable that breaks their equation, the answer that doesn't fit the test key. They wanted to hear about universities, programs, recognizable institutions that would let them exhale and think, good, we understand this one. We can measure them, define them, predict their ceiling. Instead, they got you, unmeasured, unmeasurable, with a skill ceiling that disappears into clouds they can't even see. Let me tell you what really happened during all those years when nobody was training you. While everyone else was busy collecting their certificates and credentials, you were supposedly falling behind. But you weren't. You were learning different lessons, the kind no accredited program could ever teach. You learned how to build systems from broken parts, how to extract wisdom from failure, how to turn every setback into a case study and every betrayal into research data. While they memorized approved curricula, you were dissecting reality itself, teaching yourself to see patterns in chaos, to find structure in destruction, to turn raw experience into understanding forged in survival rather than simulation. You didn't become dangerous because someone handed you knowledge. You became dangerous because you hunted it down, dragged it from the wilderness, and consumed it raw. While they thought you were lost, you were sharpening yourself. Those quiet years when you vanished from social media, stopped updating your professional profile, and disappeared from the stage where everyone performed their progress. Those were the years you were building something no one could see. They assumed you were struggling, falling behind, missing your moment while they climbed their corporate ladders and stacked their shiny new titles. But you weren't lost. You were learning in dimensions they couldn't comprehend, studying in classrooms without walls or permission. You were observing human behavior in its most unfiltered form, watching how people move when they think no one's watching. You learned psychological warfare on the front lines of your own relationships. You mastered emotional intelligence not through workshops or self-help manuals, but through the brutal, relentless education of pain and adaptation. And here's the beautiful, terrifying truth. You learned faster, deeper, and more completely than any of their institutional products ever could. When survival is your teacher, every lesson cuts to the bone. When reality is your curriculum, there's no curve, no retakes, no safety nets. You either learned or you didn't survive to see the next day. And the fact that you're still here means you mastered every lesson they try to simulate in their classrooms. But you learned it true. You learned it permanently. You learned it in ways that can't be undone. Even if you wanted to forget, you couldn't. You became a kind of educated their institutions can't replicate, a kind of skilled their systems can't measure, a kind of dangerous their background checks can't detect. So when that person in the suit leans forward and asks, with that polite skepticism, "Who trained you?" what they're really asking is something else entirely. How do we categorize you? How do we measure someone who exists beyond our known standards? What they're really asking is, how do we predict whether you'll fit inside our system? Because when you tell them nobody trained me, what you're actually saying is, I'm unpredictable. I'm unmeasurable. I built myself from the ground up using materials you don't understand and methods you would never approve of. And that's what unsettles them. Not a gap in your resume or a missing credential, but the existential crisis of facing competence that doesn't have a traceable origin. People like that, gatekeepers of conventional success, need origin stories. They need to know where you came from so they can feel safe, so they can map your abilities onto their framework of limits and blind spots. If they can define your source, they can define your ceiling. But you don't have an origin story. You have an origin myth, something that sounds impossible when told in full. Something that makes them squirm because it implies their entire structure for learning, development, and mastery might be incomplete. You are living proof that their way isn't the only way, that institutional validation isn't the only route to competence, and that some of the most lethal forms of intelligence are born from necessity, not permission. Watch their faces when you explain it. When you talk about learning negotiation because you had nothing left to trade, about mastering persuasion just to survive conversations with people who wanted you gone, about developing strategy not in classrooms but in the chaos of betrayal, armed with nothing but your mind. Watch how the professional curiosity drains from their expressions, replaced by a quiet recalibration. Because what you're describing doesn't sound like training, it sounds like trauma. It sounds like pain alchemized into precision, survival turned into skill. And that realization shakes them because you shouldn't be this good. You shouldn't be this sharp. Not without their institutions, their mentors, their step-by-step roadmaps. Yet, here you are, demonstrably capable, impossible to dismiss. A contradiction to everything they were taught to believe about success. The real question isn't who trained you, it's how did someone with no formal training become this effective? And that question terrifies them, because your existence challenges the foundation of their entire system. If someone like you, someone who learned in isolation, through necessity, through failure, can outperform people who paid 6 figures for Ivy League pedigrees, then what does that say about the value of those institutions? What does it reveal about human potential when the one who had nothing but time, pain, and willpower surpasses the ones with access to the best resources on earth? You're not just a person sitting in their office. You're a philosophical disruption wearing business casual, answering their questions with a calm that borders on dangerous. And here's what they'll never admit, even to themselves. In those quiet moments when they review your file and try to reconcile your background with your results, you threaten them. Not because you're hostile or arrogant, but because you prove their system isn't absolute. You prove that excellence can emerge from anywhere. That greatness doesn't need their stamp of approval, and that their gatekeeping was never the final word on who gets to be exceptional. You are their nightmare scenario. A walking contradiction to the institutions that claim to be the only source of legitimate expertise. You learned without them. You succeeded without them. You became formidable in spite of them. And now, here you are, in their domain, speaking their language, playing their game, and winning. Except you're not just playing their game, you've rewritten it. You're operating within their world, but on your own terms, guided by rules they've never seen, using strategies they don't even realize exist. Every move you make seems familiar to them on the surface, structured, professional, efficient. But underneath, it's powered by principles forged in a crucible they'll never understand. You learn strategy not from lectures or leadership seminars, but from necessity. You wrote your own rule book in the dark, at moments when failure wasn't theoretical, but personal and immediate. You learned the mechanics of survival and turned them into the architecture of excellence. You speak their language, but with an accent that doesn't trace back to any institution they know. It's an accent shaped by late-night staring at failure until it revealed its structure, by years of figuring out how to turn scarcity into creativity and chaos into precision. You learn to speak the dialect of action, the tone of consequence, the grammar of results. And though they can't place where it comes from, they feel the weight of it, the authenticity that can't be mimicked, the authority that isn't granted by titles but earned through scars. Every answer you give hits the mark, but it lands from an angle they never predicted. Every solution you offer works, but the logic behind it lives outside their frameworks. You see patterns they've been trained to ignore. You connect dots they don't even notice exist. You've become functionally multilingual in the language of competence, able to think in systems, adapt across disciplines, and switch between abstract and tactical thinking without effort. It's a level of versatility that can't be taught in any classroom because it's learned through raw exposure to uncertainty, through years of doing without guidance, through bleeding for every insight. And it's making them uneasy in ways they can't articulate. You can see it in the subtle shifts, the tapping of a pen, the forced laughter, the long pause before they ask the next question. They wanted to know who trained you so they could track you, verify you, contain you. They wanted a point of reference, some name they could call, some paper trail they could follow, some institution that could validate you according to their narrow hierarchy of legitimacy. But there's nobody to call. There's no certification to scan, no LinkedIn endorsement to read. Your education was invisible. Your witnesses were the walls that heard you swear under your breath, the silence that sat beside you as you built yourself back up night after night. You were your own witness, your own mentor, your own judge and jury. To them, that makes you unreliable until you perform, until they watch you do what their certified experts can't, until they see you untangle chaos in minutes that would take others weeks, until they realize your lack of formal training isn't a deficit. It's the reason you move differently, think faster, and operate with an edge their systems never produce. And when they see that, the tone changes. Suddenly, who trained you becomes, how do we keep you? The curiosity turns into urgency, the skepticism into quiet desperation. Because now they see what you are, and they know they can't replicate it. But here's the part that keeps them awake at night, staring at spreadsheets and rewatching your interview footage, trying to find the glitch in their understanding. You don't need them. Not really. Not in the way most people do. You're immune to their leverage. You've trained yourself to survive without the resources, titles, or approval they use to control others. You've lived without their validation long enough to realize it was never worth chasing. That's what terrifies them most. You can walk away at any time. They can't threaten to revoke credentials you never earned. They can't use institutional relationships to manipulate you because you never built your identity around belonging to their world. They can't trap you in bureaucracy because you've already lived through worse. You are frictionless within their systems, too independent to contain, too self-sufficient to manage. They've spent their whole careers mastering control through access, and you've just demonstrated that you can operate without any of it. That makes you an anomaly, and in their world, anomalies are dangerous. The skills you have, the ones they marvel at and quietly fear, didn't come from textbooks or structured mentorship. They came from chaos, from the long grind of figuring things out alone. You learned systems thinking by necessity, leadership through survival, and creativity through desperation. They can't commodify that. They can't turn it into a training module, can't bottle it into a leadership program, can't replicate it in a lab. They can teach people about resilience, but they can't make them live it. They can quote books on emotional intelligence, but they'll never understand what it means to actually bleed for it. You are the end product of a process they can't control, package, or sell. You're the proof that greatness doesn't need permission, that mastery can come from pain as much as from privilege. And that makes you untouchable in a way that no title, no salary, no certification could ever make someone. You are the glitch in the hierarchy, the one they can't label, can't measure, can't contain. You're the living contradiction that exposes the truth they've been trained to deny, that the system was never the source of excellence. People like you are, and that realization terrifies them more than anything. Because if someone who was never trained, never funded, never endorsed, can rise to this level of precision, intelligence, and impact, then what does that say about their institutions? What does it say about the billions spent on programs, degrees, and certifications designed to manufacture what you became through pure will? You didn't just beat the system, you rendered it optional. And that's the kind of threat that can't be fired, categorized, or contained. It can only be respected or feared. What you learned wasn't some neatly organized, instructor-approved curriculum. It was custom-built for your survival, carved from chaos and refined by necessity. Every skill you possess was tailored perfectly to the storms you had to weather, designed unconsciously through trial, error, pain, and persistence. There's no academic equivalent to that kind of learning. It's not something you can reproduce in a sterile classroom or replicate with step-by-step training modules. Your education was alive, raw, unstable, ever-shifting, constantly reshaping itself around whatever was threatening to destroy you next. It wasn't about theory, it was about survival. And survival doesn't care about credentials, it cares about what works. You are bespoke competence in a world obsessed with mass production, handcrafted brilliance in a marketplace that rewards standardization. You don't fit into their efficiency models because you were never designed to. You are the opposite of their predictability, a living, breathing contradiction to their systems. Every insight you carry is unique to the path you walked, forged in conditions no focus group could reproduce. So when they lean back in those sleek, ergonomic chairs, adjusting their ties and processing your words, "Nobody trained me," you can feel the air tighten. Because in that moment, they're not just hearing defiance, they're confronting the collapse of their assumptions. They built entire frameworks to measure and categorize people like you, and yet none of them work. Every model they use to evaluate potential starts to short-circuit when they try to map your growth. Every theory they trust about professional development becomes irrelevant in your presence. They realize, maybe for the first time, that not all mastery is measurable. You are the exception that shatters their rule, the outlier that exposes the narrowness of their bell curve. You're not a statistical anomaly. You're evidence that their understanding of growth, talent, and evolution has been incomplete all along. You're the kind of data point that forces uncomfortable questions. If someone like you exists, what else have they been missing? Let's strip away their illusions and talk about what really happened during your training. Because while they were collecting certificates in perfectly climate-controlled classrooms, you were learning the hard way, through fire, failure, and repetition. You didn't learn emotional regulation from guided meditations or therapy sessions. You learned it from trying to stay composed while your world disintegrated around you. You didn't develop stress management through bullet point lists and wellness workshops. You learned it through functioning under pressure, so intense it should have broken you. You didn't master focus from productivity podcasts. You learned it because losing focus meant losing everything. You learned patience when life refused to move faster, persistence when there were no shortcuts, and resilience when breaking down became so routine that rebuilding yourself was the only thing left to do. You became fluent in adaptation, constantly evolving to meet the next impossible situation. While others learned resilience as a buzzword, you lived it as a requirement. You didn't read about grit, you became it. You didn't attend lectures on perseverance, you embodied it every time you had to keep going despite every reason not to. In their institutions, they teach conflict resolution through controlled scenarios, case studies, simulations, and scripted exercises where mistakes are harmless. You learned it through real conflict, through conversations that could end relationships, through arguments that carried stakes no classroom could simulate. You learned to de-escalate tension not for grades but for survival. You learned to read rooms, not to impress management, but to detect danger before it arrived. You learned to navigate power dynamics, not from textbooks, but from understanding how fragile safety can be in environments built on unspoken hierarchies. Your education wasn't theoretical. It was live fire training from the first day. There were no practice rounds, no do-overs, no instructors to guide your hand. Every mistake cost something. Every success required blood, focus, and emotional endurance. And somehow, through it all, you didn't just survive. You refined. You became someone capable of functioning under the kind of pressure that most people only encounter in crisis simulations. They teach their students how to respond to emergencies. You learned how to live in one without losing your humanity. And that's the unbridgeable gap between you and their institutional products. They can teach competence, but they can't teach instinct. They can lecture about resilience, but they can't force someone to live it. They can simulate stress, but they can't replicate consequence. What you have can't be taught because it was never taught. It was earned. Your skill set wasn't acquired. It was extracted from the ugliest corners of your life, polished by repetition, and hardened through experience that would have broken most people. But what truly separates you, the thing they can't even begin to grasp, is that you didn't just learn things. You learned how to learn. You developed metacognition, that rare ability to transform every experience, good or bad, into education. You turned life itself into your teacher. Every mistake became data. Every failure became instruction. Every pain point became an experiment in evolution. You built a mind that doesn't just absorb information, it creates frameworks. You've trained yourself to observe, analyze, and adapt faster than most people can even identify a problem. When their trained professionals encounter something unfamiliar, they freeze. They go searching for a manual, a precedent, a process. You move. Instinctively, you observe, you analyze, and you build the manual in real time. You don't need instructions because you've spent your life writing your own. You've developed a learning reflex so efficient it borders on supernatural, a kind of intellectual muscle memory that thrives in chaos and uncertainty. You've become an ecosystem of continuous growth, a self-updating system of understanding. And that's the real difference. They finish their programs. You never stop training. They graduate. You evolve. They wait for instructions. You improvise. You are both student and teacher, researcher and experiment, theory and proof. You've built an inner infrastructure for growth so resilient that no setback can dismantle it. Every obstacle becomes material. Every failure becomes feedback. Every hardship becomes curriculum. That's what they can't replicate. That's what they can't control. Because your kind of education doesn't produce employees. It produces forces of nature. You're not just prepared for their world, you've outgrown it. You're not the product of a system, you're the antithesis of it. And every time you walk into one of their rooms, you remind them that the hierarchy they've built isn't the only way forward. You are proof that the human mind, when left to its own devices under extreme pressure, can evolve beyond the boundaries of permission beyond the expectations of tradition, beyond the reach of control. You didn't just learn how to survive, you learned how to transcend. And that terrifies them. Because while their professionals reach the edge of their syllabus and stop, you built your own infinite one. And you're still learning, still expanding, still becoming. When they face the unknown, they hesitate. They scramble for structure. They reach for the manual, search for the relevant chapter, flip through binders, scan the internet for the approved protocol. They look for the step-by-step instructions written by someone else long ago, hoping the past can still apply to the present. But you don't reach for instructions. You become the instruction. You don't wait for someone to tell you what to do when reality veers off script. You treat the unknown as an open lab. You observe it, dissect it, strip it down to its moving parts, identify its governing patterns, and then rebuild it into something that works. Every time life throws a new variable at you, you study it like a scientist and react like an engineer. You catalog the chaos, extract its principles, and add them to your expanding internal library of how the world truly functions. Not the world of policy manuals and leadership frameworks, but the real world. The unpredictable, contradictory, high-stakes, blood-and-bone reality most people spend their lives insulating themselves from. You've become an autonomous research organism, constantly collecting, analyzing, and iterating on existence itself. You don't execute learned behaviors, you generate new ones. You don't rely on precedent, you create it. You're improvising with a kind of structured precision that confuses people who've only ever operated within the boundaries of procedure. You're building solutions out of raw understanding, not recycled answers. And that's the difference. Your training was never about memorizing what's right. It was about learning to invent what's necessary. You're not just educated, you're educational. You are a self-sustaining, self-updating system of knowledge, constantly synthesizing experience into insight. You treat every day like a laboratory, every failure like a case study, every success like data worth refining. You are a living curriculum, a field manual for surviving complexity, and every interaction with you teaches people something about what real intelligence looks like. You are proof that existence itself can be a form of higher education if one is willing to bleed for the lesson. And now watch what happens as you collide with their world, the structured bureaucratic ecosystems that rely on predictability to function. Watch how they react to something they can't categorize. They'll attempt to integrate you, to fit you into their neat little hierarchy of rules, roles, and measurable results. But at the same time, they'll be studying you quietly, trying to decode your process. You'll become both a colleague and a mystery. They'll assign you to projects to test your limits, not realizing that the concept of a limit doesn't even apply to you. You weren't built inside a system that capped your potential. You were built in conditions where the only rule was adapt or die. Their limits are theoretical, academic. Yours were existential. They'll test you expecting to find your edges, but you'll keep expanding beyond their parameters until they realize you don't have edges in the way they understand them. They'll try to mentor you, guiding you with frameworks and principles passed down through formal training. And they'll be puzzled when you absorb their lessons in half the time, apply them differently, and then evolve them into something more effective. Not because you're rebellious or dismissive, but because your brain doesn't just take information, it integrates it. You don't mimic, you re-engineer. You don't memorize, you metabolize. You can take a single sentence of wisdom and build an entire operational system out of it. Their mentorship model was designed for linear growth. You function exponentially. Then they'll try to measure you. They'll run performance evaluations, apply competency frameworks, compare you to industry benchmarks. And that's where they'll hit a wall, because your progress won't fit their metrics. You're not a predictable data point. They're trying to measure quantum behavior with a ruler. Their tools weren't designed for people like you. They can track productivity, not perception. They can calculate output, not insight. They can record deliverables, but they can't quantify intuition, foresight, or emotional endurance. You'll break their graphs simply by existing. And then comes the unsettling realization, the one that creeps in during boardroom discussions and late-night review sessions. They can't replicate you. They can't copy-paste what you are. You can't be turned into a formula, a workshop, or a scalable product. You can't be institutionalized because what made you wasn't institutional, it was situational. Your growth emerged from the friction of hardship, the discipline of necessity, the trial and error process of surviving chaos. Your evolution only occurred under precise conditions, those moments when the walls were closing in, when there was no support system left, when the choice was simple: adapt or disappear. You became who you are because you were forced to face truth without filters, reality without safety nets. And there's no syllabus for that. They can't brand it as transformational leadership. They can't build an online course titled How to Reconstruct Yourself After Collapse. They can't sell Become Your Own Teacher While Everything Burns as a corporate strategy. They can't market the experience of betrayal deep enough to rewire your instincts. They can't commodify the loneliness that sharpened your perception. They can't monetize the kind of pain that forced you to evolve past fear. Because what built you isn't safe. It's not palatable. It's not market-friendly. It's too real, too volatile, too uncontrollable. And that's what makes you dangerous in the best possible way. You are singular, irreplicable, uncontainable. You're not the product of a system. You're the result of breaking one and surviving the aftermath. They can't franchise that process. They can't bottle it or brand it or sell it as resilience coaching. Because what made you exceptional can't be outsourced or automated. It had to be lived. So now they're stuck with you. Stuck with someone who doesn't fit their equations, who can't be reduced to a checklist or a competency model. They can't promote you the normal way because you've already exceeded the ladder. They can't manage you like an employee because you operate like a force of nature. You're not motivated by incentives, titles, or validation. You're driven by understanding. You're not chasing approval. You're chasing truth, precision, mastery. They'll have meetings about you, quiet ones, trying to figure out how to retain you, how to leverage your unique skill set. But underneath that corporate language is something more primitive: fear. Because you expose the limits of their system. You prove that genius can evolve without permission. You prove that greatness can emerge from isolation, from brokenness, from the margins. They'll analyze your habits, your mindset, your process, trying to decode the algorithm behind your success. But they'll never find it, because there is no algorithm, only you. A one-off event, a phenomenon, an unrepeatable experiment that succeeded against all odds. You are the living evidence that human potential doesn't need structure. It needs pressure. That brilliance doesn't require permission. It requires purpose. So they'll keep you close. They'll rely on you. They'll both admire and resent you. And as they sit in their meetings trying to figure out how to categorize you, you'll sit quietly, watching, learning, already 5 steps ahead. Because while they're still consulting their manuals, you've already rewritten reality's next chapter in your head. You're the one they don't know what to do with, the person whose resume looks like a riddle, whose background defies every logical sequence, whose capabilities make no sense according to their models. On paper, you shouldn't be able to do what you do. Your experience doesn't align with your results. Your credentials don't match your competence. You don't have the institutional stamps of approval, yet you perform at a level that leaves their certified experts scrambling to keep up. You are, in every measurable way, the contradiction they can't reconcile. They can't dismiss you because your impact is too tangible. They can't ignore you because you keep solving problems they thought were unsolvable, systems you fix, crises you navigate, innovations you produce that defy their expectations. They can't sideline you, because you've already demonstrated more value than half their credentialed staff combined. You're the anomaly that shouldn't exist according to their equations, the statistical impossibility that their data can't explain. You're a living glitch in their algorithm, a variable that doesn't fit, yet produces undeniable results. In their language, you're an HR anomaly. In reality, you're proof of concept for a truth they've spent decades denying: that the world's most effective people aren't always the most accredited. They're the most adaptive. You're the walking evidence that excellence can't be contained within credentials, that the ability to perform isn't tied to formal validation. You represent a dangerous idea. That capability can evolve in the wild, beyond supervision, outside their oversight, without permission. That's all for today. Dear Father, I pray for the growth of my faith. Help me trust you even when physical evidence is lacking. Let me believe in your perpetual presence, knowing you will never harm me. I understand that your thoughts for me are thoughts of prosperity and not harm, to give me a good future. Thank you, gracious and eternal Father, for always listening to my voice. I offer up this prayer to you in the name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you, Jesus, for your love and provision. I am grateful for your presence in my life and the abundance you bring. If this video resonated with you, please like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who need to hear this message. Leave a comment below about your journey and how you are preparing for your own triumphant return. If you'd like to support our work, please consider contributing through Buy Me a Coffee. This helps us continually improve our content to offer you the best. The link to Buy Me a Coffee is in the description. No gift is too small. Whether it's a penny, a prayer, or a share, your generosity helps spread God's word and brings hope to others. Don't stop here. Watch our next video for powerful revelations about the signs that reveal you are the chosen one. We've enjoyed following this spiritual journey with you. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Keep shining brightly and embrace your destiny with courage. See you next time. Blessings to all the beautiful souls from the Enlighten Wisdom.